Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back again to another episode of As I Live and Grieve. Thanks so much for joining me again this week. My guest this week is really someone special, and I think you are going to truly be entranced by this conversation. With me today is Gina Gale Gray. Gina, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. We had just a brief chat the other night, and I was enthralled at your experience, your background. And I just know that the conversation today is going to be it's going to be intimate, it's going to be inspirational, and it's going to be something that will really make readers feel love in their hearts. I just know that to be true. So before we get started, would you just start us off, Gina, by giving our listeners a little bit of your background, please?
Oh, gosh. Let me just give you my background as it relates to this book that we're going to talk about today.
Sure.
Okay. I had a son, and his name was Spencer, and he was gifted into my life in 1995 and lived 23 years. And Spencer never was able to speak words, and he was never able to move himself independently. But he lived. He lived his life like a champion, and he was a great, great teacher. And what I learned from getting to be his mother and be in partnership with him all those years was, with him not able to communicate with words, was how to listen to the silence. And that's why part of the reason why the name of our book is Listen to the Silence. And it's a very important thing for us all to do, to listen more. And when you listen to the silence, you're listening with your heart more than your mind. Yeah. So, yeah, that's where we're going to go with the conversation today. I was completely consumed with being his caregiver, being his mother, and he and I were partners in life with making sure that he lived his life to the absolute fullest. And over time, as he grew and his limitations came to light, every time that we were told that we couldn't do something or that something was going to slow us down, we just said, well, we'll see about that.
Right.
And that's pretty much the way that we lived his life. And so, like I said, he was 23 years unable to speak words. And then the last 7 years of his life, he was actually on a ventilator. And so he had to have his cuff on his ventilator, on his trach tube, he had to have it inflated. So what that meant was that he could no longer make a sound. So his last 7 years of life were in complete silence. Yeah. So it was during that time that my ability to communicate telepathically with him stepped up greatly. We figured out how to communicate telepathically through the 23 years. So I say I have 23 years experience speaking with telepathically with spiritual beings. So when Spencer went to the other side, it stepped up even more because he had so many more abilities. Once he dropped his body and entered the other side, he had a lot to say. So that is what eventually led to writing the book, Listen to the Silence.
Well, this story, just though it's very brief, it's only a couple minutes long, but it prompts so many questions in my mind. First of all, let me just say that I love that phrase, listen to the silence, because one of my very, very favorite things to do is when I just need some peace, when I need to kind of relax a bit, chill, get rid of some stress, I like to be somewhere that I can have absolutely no sound, no distractions, and listen to the silence. But for our listeners, that might be kind of a strange perspective. What do you hear in the silence? What can you hear in the silence?
Well, what I believe we can hear in the silence is we can hear all spiritual beings communicate with us, including ourselves, because I see our soul as a spirit soul. I don't separate. I don't talk about spirit and I don't talk about soul as separate entities. There's a lot of there's a lot of division in that world talking about those things. So I see it as our spirit soul. And in silence, we can absolutely hear the messages that come through from our highest knowing and from that place, the place called love. That is one of the messages that Spencer imparts in his book is some really, really juicy information about, according to him, love is a place.
A place.
Love is a place. And it's a place where you can go because it's a place where your spirit and soul are free to go all the time. And it took me a while to really digest that. But the more I worked with it and thought about things like, why do we say I'm in love? I'm in love with that person. And why do we say I'm no longer in love with that person? We go to love together. It's a place.
It's a place.
And,
wow.
And you cannot go through the doorway of the place called love carrying any judgment.
All right. I'm thinking that. I know the listeners can't see my wrinkled eyebrows or anything, but I'm really thinking about that. Love is a Place sounds like an excellent title for your next book. First of all, let me just put that out there. Love is a Place. I'm really going to have to work on that. It makes some sense initially. Well, I want to live there. Let me say that. I just want to live there. I feel like my heart is full of love. Mm-hmm. There are very few people, if any, that I can actually say I hate. Mm-hmm. There are people who I'm disappointed in, certainly. Love is a Place. All right. Yeah. All right. I'm going to set that aside for right now. And Spencer conveyed this to you, and then you and Spencer communicated until eventually you were able to really accept this and understand it.
Yes, it was all part of my healing through my grief.
Okay.
Once he left. Because the way that he explained it to me, love is a place. When you go there, you bathe in the essence of love. And we go there in our dreams. We go there when anytime that you feel the essence of love, you are in the place called love.
That place.
So like in the dream time, we go in and out of the place called love. It's free. The ride is free. We go, we're uninhibited when we're in our dream state. So we get to go there quite a bit. That's where source is. That's where source and all the beautiful souls are in full joy, full and complete joy. And when we come back from there, when we travel in and out of the place called love, we're bathed in the essence of love. And the way that like if you think about a grandmother or a grandfather or a mother or a sister, anyone that you're extremely close to, every time that you are in their presence, you feel the essence of love. And you can say, we are in love together now. I'm in love. I'm in the same place of love with this person at this time. So you know what I'm talking about?
I'm getting it. It's beginning to fit. It's the puzzle pieces are beginning to link. And certainly we say, I'm in love, you're in love, many, many times in our lives. Yet we never think of it being a place.
Yeah.
We think of it, I think most of us think of it as an emotion almost. It's an emotional response, but it's a place. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I'm still going to have that work in my brain, but I want to talk for another minute. I have another question. Some of my questions, I call them almost toddler questions because they may seem very simplistic, but they're questions that I figure listeners might want to know too. You used the word telepathic as far as your communications with Spencer. Are telepathic communications the same as what mediums use?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Because telepathy is communicating without words. It's communicating with thought.
Okay. All right.
Sharing of thought forms.
Okay. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're communicating with the spirit world. It just means you're communicating without words, pure and simple.
I would say yes, after having my experience with Spencer here in human form and learning that when he could not communicate with words, he could get his messages to me in that way.
Okay. Okay. Now, for those of us, and I say us because I do have, though not as many as I used to, skeptic tendencies. I'm a science-based person. If in the silence, You open yourself to whatever sounds or impressions or vibrations or whatever you might feel or hear. How do you determine and how do you interpret a message? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay.
It does. And there's two forms of communication. There's receptive communication and there's expressive communication.
Okay.
So we're talking about receptive communication.
Right.
And how these messages coming from spirit or coming from any form of spirit or your animals,
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has all the ordinary senses, the sight, the hearing, the feeling. We also all have these extraordinary senses. So each of those senses have an extraordinary version. They're referred to as the clairs.
The clairs.
Yes. So the clairaudience, the clairsentient, the clairvoyant.
Right.
And they're unique to each individual. And by the way, this is something that I teach in my work with clients because
All right.
Yeah, it's a process and it's unique to each individual. So me, for instance, my most profound, extraordinary sense is hearing. When I hear a message in my mind and I know that it wasn't a thought of my own,
Mm-hmm.
it takes discernment. First of all, if I want to give it attention, if I want to know more about what that message was, it will be because it feels good. It feels like love. It feels like I'm in love.
Okay.
So that is my way of discerning that it's coming from a higher vibrational being.
Okay.
So whether it's a spiritual being that was someone we knew in human form or a spirit guide or an angel or a spirit guardian, which I refer to as the guards because they're there to protect us. So I start with paying attention to what direction they come from and then just start narrowing it down. And I will ask, who are you? Who's speaking to me? What do I call you? Those kinds of questions.
All right.
And all of this was expanded greatly after Spencer left, because when he got on the other side and he reconnected with his team over there was a lot to be done. And there were a lot of assignments given to me because our journey was going to continue. We had the 23 years as I'm the mother, he's the son.
Right.
And I took care of him. I met all of his needs. I and our family, his sister, his dad, caretakers. It was a team effort.
Sure.
And everyone was taking care of Spencer while learning from Spencer. So when he got to the other side, he was real clear about, now I am taking care of you. And the messages started coming through very, very clearly of what the assignments were going to be. So the first messages were just brief, and they would come to me when I needed them the most, when I would be down, when I would be deep in my grief and really needed something to lift me up. That's when a message would come in. Sometimes they would come in with something I would hear. Sometimes I would all of a sudden feel a moment of comfort, or I would be told to listen. If I was playing music, I would be told to listen, or I would be told turn around. If I was going to be shown something to see with my extraordinary eyes and my ordinary eyes, I would be told to turn around and look, and I would see. If I was told to listen and music was playing, there would be a specific line at that moment in that song playing that was a message directly to me.
Okay.
And so I really tuned into that station, just like you can dial your mind to a higher vibration by choosing to, getting up in that higher level where there's a lot of very, very good positive information that keeps us heading toward the hope. I like hope. I like a lot of hope.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I would find Spencer, and that's where I would hear those messages coming.
Wow. Processing everything. And because of the experience you've had, and with Spencer's assistance, you are able to help others.
Yes.
Right? Are you able to help them communicate telepathically with the loved ones that they have lost, for example? One of the things people in grief crave the most is, I want a message, I want a sign, I wish I could tell them how much, whatever. Or I wish they would let me know, whatever. And you are able to help people learn how to do this.
Yes. Together with Spencer. And it's been quite fascinating because he has actually brought people to me that show up as clients. And once we start working together, we find out that there is someone working with Spencer on the other side that connected us.
Oh, wow, because they want to be connected
Yes.
to their person.
Yes. And
That's astounding.
It's been so fascinating because he's knowing from that side all of these other spiritual beings that are watching their loved ones grieve on this side.
Sure.
And that desperation, like you say, there's so many people who would just love to connect. They want to connect. They want to know. They want answers. And the first thing that has to happen is there has to be a deprogramming of this is not possible.
That takes care of the skepticism that gets in the way.
It does, and that's a mind program that's been put into people for many years. Our limitations, and we can't, and that's not possible. And religion played a huge role in that, and did so much harm.
Absolutely.
Telling us that we had to have somebody in between us and our God, our source, our angels. Well, no, we don't. And so Spencer and I have been doing the work of breaking through that barrier and letting people know. So one of the keys to this is when someone is desperately wanting a message and desperately wanting to connect, you have to step back and assess what is the vibrational level of the emotion of desperation.
The vibrational level of the emotion of desperation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Emotions have different vibratory frequency levels.
Okay.
And the bottom of the pit are shame, guilt, grief, depression, desperation, sadness. When we are there and the spiritual beings, the vibration that they are at is in the numbers are very, very high. They're right there. For instance, Spencer is right there with Source. I know what type of angelic being he is. And so there's different levels of frequency and vibration. As the humans that cross over, when they become spirit, they go through different levels of evolution. We continue to evolve. That's what the soul does. It's a continuation journey. There's no such thing as death. There's a continuation journey, and it starts the moment they cross over.
Okay.
So they are of such high vibratory frequency that for them to be able, when someone is in the depth of desperation and grief, they have to drop to the density of that frequency to be able to give a message or to be able to communicate. They can only do that very briefly, and then they have to get back into their higher vibration.
Wherever they are.
Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why they use all of these very interesting ways to communicate. And electricity is a very well known. A lot of people are aware that lights will flicker.
Right.
Electrical things will pulsate because it's really easy for them to use electrical energy to communicate with us. They don't have to drop their frequency so much if they can tap into some electrical frequency to get our attention.
Okay.
So over time, the higher they evolve, and as we evolve through our grief, we must work through our grief. We cannot go around it. We cannot go under it. We cannot go bury it in the backyard like we bury the body. And it's not over in 2 weeks.
Nope.
It's not over in 2 weeks when the casseroles stop arriving at the door.
No.
It is just beginning.
No.
So yeah, that's key. When somebody is desperately wanting to connect and they're trying so hard, the same thing applies to prayer, because some religions taught to pray, and pray is so many prayers are please, 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 and it's in that place of desperation. And so that's a factor. And then also we don't wait for the answer.
Right.
We just keep throwing it out there and don't wait. Yeah. We don't listen to the silence.
Right.
So people who are desperately wanting a connection and they're looking for all of these ways, sometimes they don't wait for the answer. They don't give the spiritual being time to create that connection from their side. Because in Spencer's book, he talks about all the different ways that he uses to communicate. And these are the ways that he used to communicate when he was here on Earth. And those were all preparations for me to know so I could do this work after he left. So there's a chapter on each in his book. So he talks about how he uses orbs of light. All spiritual beings use orbs of light to communicate. Communicating with numbers. numbers have a specific frequency, and the messages that are related to those numbers are very, very useful to the spiritual beings.
Okay.
And when somebody acknowledges that a certain number is being used and then knows that it's their loved one using that,
Mm-hmm.
the possibilities are absolutely limitless.
Wow.
Another is shape-shifting. Shape-shifting, he's explained in his book how they shape-shift. And shape-shifting is okay if a dragonfly shows up or a butterfly shows up, or in Spencer's case, he shows up as a jaguar.
Really?
Yes.
I remember seeing a picture on your website about the jaguar.
Yeah, he has a very, very powerful connection with the feline, both on Earth and in the spirit world. And felines, cats, have very unique characteristics and
Sure.
lots of powers. They're, have been revered and honored for years in many cultures. So yeah, there's shape-shifting. Using song lyrics. All the spiritual beings use song lyrics. And I say, because Spencer used that in his entire life, his entire 23 years, he used the lyrics of song to speak complete sentences and tell complete stories. And so when he crossed over, I say he now has unlimited tokens to the cosmic jukebox. So he can.
I like that.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful how he uses it. And people will hear something in a song, or they'll just stop with, oh, well, that song was our favorite song, or so and so like that song. If they'll take it a step farther and play that song over and over again, they will hear a message in those lyrics that speaks directly to them. It will be undeniable. It will happen all the time. Once that acceptance of this that I'm talking about open, the spirit being on the other side gets so happy, and that connection is made. And Spencer and I say that's building the bridge. So we are building the bridge between people who are still on Earth and their loved ones who are now on the other side. He's building the bridge from his side, bringing the people from his side to that bridge. I'm building it from my side. We meet in the middle, connect these people, and then we're done. Because all of these things you will know. You have a personal relationship in your heart and in your soul with your loved ones who are now in spirit form. They will continue to look for what those modes of messaging are.
Okay.
And it works.
Wow. And wow is the best word I can think of at the moment, because you have said so much. For someone like myself who has some skepticism, that I honestly believe that my personal skepticism is powerful enough that would probably prevent me from accepting many of these principles and practices. But you mentioned there is a process of deprogramming. So that would be helpful to me. And then to go beyond that into learning how to perceive, accept, and understand and communicate. That's, at the moment, it's like mind blown. And now I also know that I have to read the book. Before it was, I want to read the book. Now I know I have to read the book. Unfortunately, there's just not enough time here for me to ask as many questions as I really would like to. So what I'm going to say, and I'm sure listeners also have many questions on their minds as well. So I need to wind down the podcast. And the very first step of that process, Gina, is for me to actually turn the microphone and the floor over to you so that you can speak directly to the listeners without me interrupting with questions or such amazing words like wow. So such simplistic words like wow. Speak directly to them. Let them know more about the book. Let them know about what you offer them, and know that your contact information certainly will be in the podcast notes as well. So even though you might mention it, listeners, you don't have to scramble to write it down unless you really choose to. It'll be in the podcast notes. So at this moment in time, Gina, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. The book is Listen to the Silence, Messages and Miracles from Spencer, Who Never Spoke Words. And the book, I started writing the book when Spencer was 5 years old, because I knew by then I had a child who was not going to be able to communicate with words. When Spencer crossed over, he very soon let me know that the book was going to be written, but it was going to be from his perspective. So the creative process of this book was me going into a deep meditation and turning the keyboard, turning my fingers over to Spencer. So the entire book is channeled. That's why it's Messages and Miracles from Spencer, because it is from his perspective, living 23 years in a body that could not communicate. And he talks about all the different ways that he used to communicate when he was in physical form, and then also how much greater those skills are now that he's in spirit form. So our hope is, we know there are a lot of people who have people that they love in their life who are not able to communicate. There's a lot of reasons for this. Elderly, anybody who's on a ventilator and cannot be off the ventilator, people who are very near the exit process and cannot speak, they still can communicate. So that is our hope, that we can help people maybe get some ideas, or maybe listen if they have a child who was born unable to speak, that they can get some ideas in here of how to listen to their child. There's every version of the book that can be bought in all places. There is even an audiobook that is absolutely fascinating, because Spencer told me that he wanted it to be read by a man with a deep voice with a British accent. And we're from Texas, so I had to really question this.
I love it.
And it was such a fun journey to get to that, to get to the why of that. And he finally said, Madre, my name, Spencer, Lloyd, Gray, it's all English. He said, look it up. It's all English. So, and we never heard his deep voice, because he went on the ventilator before he had matured and could still make sounds. And once he was on the ventilator, he could never make a sound. So I didn't know that his man voice was a deep voice, but he wanted that to be clear. So it is a beautiful experience to listen to it in the audio form. So any support that we can get. And then anyone who wants to come and work with me, and I can help work through the grief. I can help communicate with loved ones on the other side. I actually have moved to Mexico, and I have opened a private retreat center for very small groups to come, and I am offering healing through grief 3 and 5 day retreats that will do some intense work on connecting. And the most important thing that I have to offer anyone at this point is I'm a good listener. And people absolutely, this is one of Spencer's inspirations. Everybody needs to be listened to and deserves to be heard. Mm-hmm. And it's so important.
Absolutely. First of all, and probably not first, this is probably ninth of all, I don't know for sure. You are extremely eloquent. The words you speak, the way you speak them, makes me think that Spencer is guiding your words tonight. Actually, for our listeners, I want to make a few suggestions. My first suggestion would be to purchase the book. I'm going for the audiobook, because that's pretty much my primary way of reading lately, because I spend so much time in my car. So I love having an audiobook to keep me company on my commutes or my errands or my drives to different places. So I'm going for the audiobook, and I invite my listeners to join me in whatever version of the book they want, because I want to hear more from Spencer, and I want to absorb his communications, his words as well. I'm fascinated with this entire story, and it makes me want to take my skepticism and put it in a little ball, like I might make a meatball, pack it all up and just toss it out the window. I'm not able to do that, but perhaps after the book, I may feel like taking the next step. My other suggestion for our listeners is that they reach out to you. For those listeners that desperately want to be able to communicate with their loved one that they have lost, loved one or loved ones. Many make the decision to go to a medium and have a reading. Wouldn't it be better if you could just sit down and in the silence communicate any time you wanted to? Wouldn't it be wonderful to have that ability, that gift? So I encourage you and suggest that you reach out to Gina Talk to her about it. See what might work for you. Like she says, she's a good listener. She's a fascinating woman, and I invite all of you to reach out to her directly. Again, her contact information will be in the podcast notes. If for some reason you can't locate it, just send me an email. I'll put you in touch with her. Not a problem at all. I really, really, really encourage you to think about that. As well, maybe you know someone who is just desperate in their grief to communicate with whoever they lost. I don't know. Holidays are coming up. Sounds to me like this book would make an excellent gift for the holidays. And it's one of those things that I think, Thanksgiving is right around the corner. What a wonderful gift it might make for your hostess on Thanksgiving. At any rate, you get it, right? I think we should all check this out. So join me in doing that. And now, sadly, I really have to wrap up. This is always the part of the podcast that makes me a little sad because there are so many more questions I have. And I'll get answers to those questions eventually in many different ways, I'm sure. But for now, listeners, I want to remind you all to take care of yourselves. And one of the best ways to take care of yourself is to think about what you need and want and try to develop a plan to achieve that. Make yourself a priority. Make your life, make your dreams, make your own wishes a priority. That's great self-care. And by all means, please, I hope you return again next week as we all continue to live and grieve. Thanks so much, Gina.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveandgrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.